Black Phone 2 is simply a sequel that doesn't need to exist. It's also, not really that great. It definitely doesn't suck, but it is for sure a letdown if you're a fan of the original. When I found out they were making a sequel to The Black Phone, I had some choice words.
Fuck you!
And it turns out I had a good reason for feeling that way. What we get is certainly a competently made movie with some excellent character work. We get plenty of reasonable story follow-up with Finn and Gwen, exploring the trauma of the first film and the aftermath. But it's hard sitting in your seat in the theater not recognizing the cash grab that's sitting before you. One of the few obnoxious things about this one is the film simply not playing by its own rules. It has internal logic that's set up and then promptly refuses to follow it in order to give you cheap frights and little spooks here and there. In essence, the original required absolutely no follow-up at all. It truly stood on its own, and the grabber was interesting enough in his own right to eventually get that horror icon status this sequel is desperately reaching for, or grabbing for if you're into puns. However, if I were to give it some slack, Black Phone 2 does enough with the original film's concept of ghosts and ESP to justify its existence, although just barely. It unfortunately follows in the missteps of other legendary horror icons, an expanding lore that ends up sucking everything out that made them interesting in the first place. Characters like Hannibal Lecter and the Grabber were more interesting without extended backgrounds. The mystery behind them is what created the anxiety they induced on screen. So fleshing that out like Black Phone 2 does removes a lot of the Grabber's power and intrigue. And that leads us to what sucks about the Grabber in this one. He's not the Grabber. He's fucking caffeine-free Freddy Krueger. He's the Coke Zero of Freddy's. Anything that was scary about him in the original film is fleshed out to the point he's just not interesting anymore. Because we know everything, and he's also a complete pussy in this. You know how he's a notorious serial killer in the original? Well, here his powers are amplified because he's a killer ghost. Or would be if he actually killed anybody. I'll expand on this further, but it's probably best just to give you a breakdown of the story real quick so you have context, because from the box office receipts, it doesn't look like a lot of people are going to see this one. Spoilers ahead, just in case you plan on seeing it though. The story of Black Phone 2... We start a few years after the first film, where it's winter and a now teenage Finn and Gwen are picking up the pieces from the Grabber's antics. And by antics, I mean his obsessive serial killing. Finn has learned a few lessons from his friend-turned-Grabber victim Robin, bashing in a kid's face who was new at school and daring to challenge him. Looks like Finn is anything but a pushover now. While Finn is self-medicating with weed and trying to pretend nothing happened to him all those years ago, Gwen starts seeing a boy named Ernesto, and is also having nightmares where she's seeing little boys who are victims of someone. I'll give you one fucking guess who. In her visions, she keeps seeing them at the bottom of a frozen lake, and eventually she's drawn to a youth camp at you guessed it, a local frozen lake. She's convinced that the missing boys are there. So she and Finn convince their now sober father to let them go under the guise of work-for-hire camp counselors. As soon as they arrive, there's a, shocker, black telephone that Finn keeps hearing ring, while Gwen continues to have nightmares that get increasingly associated with the Grabber. Turns out the Grabber's escaped from hell and wants revenge on Finn for killing him, so he plans on killing the thing he holds the most dear. Why, Gwen, of course. When shit gets really fired up and everyone there sees Gwen attacked in her sleep by the Grabber, see, told you, Diet Freddy Krueger, Armando, the head of the camp, tells Gwen and Finn that he's been looking for the bodies of the dead boys for decades now, and thinks Gwen's a sign from God that he's finally going to find them. Turns out the Grabber was once a maintenance man at the camp known as Wild Bill, totally appropriate for a fucking kids camp, and the boys were his first victims. Gwen figures that it's the missing boys who give the Grabber his power, so the movie turns into a murder not-so-mystery when they try to find the bodies in order to stop the Grabber in his tracks. Gwen seems like she has fucking narcolepsy though, because I've never seen someone fall asleep so often, and one night when she's, surprise, asleep, the Grabber shows her the truth about her mother, that she was a counselor at the camp and had figured out the truth about Wild Bill murdering the boys, so he killed her. That's right, Gwen's mom didn't actually murder herself, it was the Grabber who did it. After that, old Wild Bill tries to kill her, assuming if he does it while she's sleeping, she'll die in real life. Again, just straight up Freddy Krueger shit. But she realizes that in her dreams, she's in control, so she force pushes his ass away, once she learns she can fight back Carrie style. Eventually, the group find the bodies of the dead and frozen victims, and in a final, ultra-cringe finale, Gwen falls asleep in the middle of a stress-inducing event. because the plot needs her to, but they unite and beat up an invisible grabber who just turns into an embarrassment. Finn grabs him by the head and just smashes his shit into oblivion, before the grabber's eventually pulled down into the waters below by the ghosts of his victims. And that's it, that's the end, that's the fucking movie. You know, Black Phone 2 rests on a solid foundation. It actually sets up some things that have a lot of potential, but the movie simply doesn't follow through on any of them. For example, with the film taking place at a religious camp, a hardcore Christian couple who works there thinks Gwen is a witch after they first see her attacked by an invisible enemy, thinking she's possessed or cursed. The film could have let us down some great character moments here, following an arc for them and Gwen that mixes with head of camp Armando, who thinks Gwen is a sign from God. This would have been really fun to explore, and the film could have been more focused on the characters, leading to scares and possibly even deaths that might have more weight. But instead, it focuses on making the grabber a Freddy Krueger wannabe and cheap scares for the sake of scares. And comparing this film's scares to the last one creates an immense juxtaposition. The original scares were character and plot driven, whereas this one is lazy and creates huge gaps in logic, creating a major crater in your fucking head as you try to rationalize what you're seeing with the internal logic the movie tries to have. One example is how the grabber needs to prevent them from finding the lost dead kids. He says that he has a right to defend himself from them taking away his power, but at no point does he actually try to stop any of them until it's too late and they're already at the lake. Like, at any point, the grabber could have taken them all out throughout the entire fucking movie, but he just fucks with Gwen the entire time. Another example of this would be how the grabber's magic, or however you want to describe it, actually works. When Gwen is asleep is when he can attack, and he's actually there, just invisible, I guess. Well, there's a scene midway through the film when the grabber actually calls Armando on an old CB radio and starts throwing snowballs at his window to scare him. Like, since when did this fucking guy have ESP? Let's just assume Gwen is sleeping in that scene. Why didn't the grabber ever communicate with anyone else? It completely eliminates anything special Finn had going on too, all for the sake of a cheap scare. Speaking of Finn, he's not the main character anymore. Gwen is. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is disappointing. Although Gwen is a fantastic character, it does get a little old hearing her curse everyone out with her constant, "Listen, you butt-fucking ass muncher," speak. While that's consistent with how she talked in the previous movie, it does this one no favors. It makes the grabber look even less intimidating when she's cursing him out at the end as she drives an axe into his fucking forehead. We get that instead of any real resolution between Finn and the grabber. Around the end of the second act, there's a heart-to-heart conversation between Armando and Finn, where Armando assures him that he's stronger than he thinks he is, and that he'll be able to protect his sister. But this ultimately leads to nothing, because Gwen basically takes care of the grabber all by herself once she realizes she's in control in the dreamscape. And now, speaking of the grabber, he's a complete pussy in this movie, and I mean a real bitch. He's basically a dopey, clumsy version of him who's incapable of killing a single person. That's right, the grabber, a tempted horror icon, is not able to kill one single person in this entire movie. The most he can do is drag people around a little bit and chuck shit at them, I guess. His first real interaction with Gwen is when he attempts to throw her into a fire, and for a split second I actually thought he was going to do it. I thought, oh wow, this is going to really set Finn off and lead to the ultimate finale. What a ballsy thing to do. But nope, he doesn't even come close to it. Two people are able to grab Gwen right out of his invisible pussy hands, and instead of attacking them, let alone killing them, he just throws some pots and pans and then fades away into the corner of the room. And the two hardcore religious characters I mentioned, who thought Gwen is possessed or a witch, also have a run-in with the grabber. And since the film didn't do anything interesting with them, you're expecting that they are at minimum the two disposable characters that will fall victim to him. But nope, not even close. He fucks with them a little bit, skating by them while on the ice, and dragging his axe across their heads, but never actually does us the service of killing the characters off. I mean, how fucking incompetent can this guy be? The filmmakers desperately want to create a new horror icon, but he can't even manage one single kill in an entire movie. What even is this? Considering how easily he's defeated, and defeated in such an embarrassing manner, and considering how incompetent he is at killing anyone, the film has completely erased any mystique, intrigue, or scariness the character had in the first place. He's simply not terrifying in any way, shape, or form anymore. In the first film, it was horrifying to think an average man could be such a demonic, horrendous human being. In this, though, he's emulating Freddy, one of the greatest horror icons ever, so there was a chance there too, but they completely dropped the ball. For all its flaws, though, the Black Phone 2 actually nails its character work. It captures the lingering trauma from the first film with a surprising level of nuance, showing how surviving something monstrous doesn't mean you just move on. Finn, the lone escapee of the Grabber, is still carrying his scars, numbing himself with weed the same way his father once did with alcohol. That parallel alone says more than the film's dialogue ever could. And Gwen's arc is equally strong. Despite her clairvoyant gift helping save her brother, she's still ostracized by her peers, a reminder that heroism doesn't guarantee acceptance. And their father's recovery, from a violent drunk to a man quietly fighting for redemption, gives the family a fragile hope. The movie only brushes the surface of these dynamics, but what's there is genuinely compelling, and you almost wish the film leaned harder into that instead of franchise setup. These characters are played by some wonderful actors too, so let me compliment the movie a little bit more. Mason Thames absolutely kills it as Finney Blake. The Grabber's only known survivor, and now a walking monument to unprocessed trauma. It's genuinely impressive how much he's grown as an actor. He sells Finney's quiet torment without turning it into some melodramatic pity party. You feel the weight on him, the twitchy energy of a kid who's seen hell and is just trying to smoke it away. It's grounded, real, and kind of haunting. But Madeline McGraw is the MVP. She doesn't just steal the movie, she commits grand larceny. She's hilarious, commanding, and completely believable as Gwen, the psychic little sister who now runs the emotional core of the film. Even when the dialogue fumbles and hands her some cringeworthy lines, she bulldozes through them with pure charisma. When she's firing off insults like sanctimonious twat, it's so perfectly delivered that you can't help but laugh. She's got that rare child actor confidence that never feels forced. Ethan Hawke returns, of course, as the Grabber, doing his best with a script that neuters his menace. He's still magnetic, even if the character now feels more like a haunted house attraction than a genuine threat. And Jeremy Davies brings surprising warmth to the once abusive father, sober, broken, but trying. Even Miguel Mora fits his part as Gwen's awkward boyfriend. Honestly, the cast brings more life to this movie than the writing ever does. They deserve a better sequel than this. And to give further credit where it's due, Scott Derrickson is still a hell of a director. The man knows how to frame a shot and make even a quiet moment crawl under your skin. The Black Phone 2 looks fantastic, eerie, stylish, and atmospheric in all the right ways. His shot composition and lighting choices alone put most horror sequels to shame. It's clear Derrickson hasn't lost a step behind the camera. If anything, his visual storytelling is sharper here than ever. The dream sequences in particular are brilliant. That grainy 8mm style aesthetic he uses for Gwen's visions is such a smart touch. It feels homemade, like a nightmare caught on film stock. You can tell that's where Derrickson's fingerprints are all over the project. So no, the issue isn't the direction, it's not the acting, it's not even the character work. The problem, and it's a big one, is the writing. The story was done. It had a natural end. Stretching it into a sequel makes the whole thing feel like someone wringing out a dry rag for one more drop of content. Derrickson does his job as a director, but he co-wrote this movie, and it's his script that ultimately lets his directing down, and lets down the Grabber himself. Going back to the Grabber, it's obvious they're still trying to turn him into the next big horror icon, and honestly, I called that after the first movie. I even said it in my review of it. He had all the makings of one: the mask, the menace, the mystery. If they'd stopped there, the Black Phone could have easily stood as a modern cult classic, and the Grabber would have had his place carved out in the Slasher Hall of Fame. Maybe even a fucking Call of Duty operator skin. But the Black Phone 2 completely derails that potential. Instead of building on what made him terrifying, the sequel splits his identity in half. The first film gave us a grounded human monster, cruel, unpredictable, and genuinely unnerving. This one turns him into a ghostly punching bag, a neutered version of his former self who spends most of the runtime getting tossed around like a fucking Scooby-Doo villain. You can't build horror legacy off of that. There's no consistency in tone or threat level, just two conflicting versions of a villain who could have been iconic. The Grabber went from terrifying figure to tragic joke, and it's hard to fear something that the movie itself doesn't seem to take seriously anymore. The Black Phone 2 joins the ever-growing pile of unnecessary horror sequels nobody asked for, right next to Megan 2, which was its own abomination. Two potential horror icons, both completely fumbled. The Grabber could have been something special. Megan could have been something special. But Hollywood can't resist milking a good idea until it's dry enough to creak. The original Black Phone didn't need a sequel. It ended clean, satisfying, and self-contained. But here we go again, dragged back into the grave for another round of, what if we just did it again? Could there be a Black Phone 3? Oh, abso-fucking-lutely. They'll find a way. Maybe it's new kids, new ghosts, new whatever. But it's all just window dressing. You can't recapture what's already been exercised. It's not like Scream where the mask changes hands and the mythology resets. The Grabber is the brand, and running him back for another sequel only make the first film look worse. The same way Joker 2 cheapened Joker 1. If there's any mercy left in this genre, this will end. Let the phone stay hung up, bitches. Let the Grabber rot in peace. But let's be honest, If this thing does turn a profit, they'll be back at it before the credits finish rolling. GG's.